Welcome, everyone. I'm Kirsten.
And I'm Sam.
And we're here to chew the metaphysical fat. Woohoo!
Woohoo! Yes, we are.
Woohoo!
We've got an episode today that's lined up. We've not got guests this week because we thought it would be quite important to have a little bit of a chat with me and Kirsten, and just share some of our thoughts and the energies that have been coming through recently, and how we've been managing them, because I'm sure everybody at home has also been feeling the big shifts. So, Kirsten, do you want to start and just let us know what's been going on with you a bit this week?
Yeah. So, mellow greetings, Yuki Duki. That's kind of how my week has been. Not really, though. Not mellow. It's been really intense.
Yeah.
Has it not been intense? I know both, at least Sam and I have really been experiencing a lot of intensity. And I've done some really deep healing this week, back to trauma from past lives. And it's just like, really? I mean, we have to heal the trauma from this life, which is extensive. We got ancestral trauma coming up for healing. Plus, we got to do the past lives thing. It's like, yeah, here we go. But I really actually, with Sam's help, because Sam helped me with this, and I do recommend, if you have a friend who can help you, there are some things that are just really difficult to face by yourself. And that's what I walked into this week, because I revisited a very intense trauma in which I died, and it was not for the faint of heart, we'll just say. And fortunately, Sam was there for me, because I don't think I could have walked through that one by myself. And the interesting thing was that the biggest release came through a very, in comparison, small traumatic event that happened to me. When was that? I don't know, a couple days ago. Mm-hmm. Several days ago, in which my dog dragged a half-dead baby fawn into my yard. And we're just going to leave it at that right now, because I'm not really ready to talk about that. But it really, what it actually did, even though it seemed really horrific, was that it helped me to, with Sam's help, to unpick something that has been a major block in this lifetime for me, one of my deep core wounds. And so it was really a very, even though it was not an easy week. It was really a very amazing and transformative week. So
yeah,
transformation at the outset often looks like destruction. So, yeah, I'm going to throw it back to you, Sam. Why don't you tell us about your week, because you've also had a very intense week.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all been going through the energies, haven't we? But I want to just touch on what you were saying about transformation, because you make such a good point. We talk about the tarot card in tarot, and it's essentially the leveling of everything that you've built. It can feel like real destruction, that your life is falling down around you, and it can feel very kind of chaotic. But as we know, chaos is actually the breeding ground for creation, because order comes from chaos, and that's what's happening a lot of times when we're on our healing journey. Now, both Kirsten and I have done a lot of inner work and healing, so we're kind of on the path, and we are used to the roller coaster that comes in. I mean, you're never fully used to it, but you get used to the twists and the turns a little bit, and the peaks and the troughs, and you can kind of see where you are in your process as you're going through it. You build up kind of an awareness. Now, even you, Kirsten, who's done this for a very long time, were thrown a little bit by some of the changes that have come this week, because it was very intense. And that's what we're all being called to do at the moment, is really go into ourselves quite deeply, and look at the bits that have been kind of hiding. And this feels like a real collective wound. I know there's been a lot going on in the media at the moment, that's caused some distress, I think. And whenever there's a lot of tumultuous energy being played out on the world stage, this is also kind of like the collective consciousness bringing up the shadow for us to look at. And it can be very uncomfortable. And even if you don't watch the news, or if you limit your social interactions, you will still feel it, because we're all an empathic collective species. You know, we're all linked through this collective consciousness grid. So this is kind of why we thought it was a really important topic to cover this week, because June has been very chaotic for a lot of people. Yeah, I think that's putting it lightly, isn't it, really, Kirsten? But
yes.
Yeah.
And I think, all of us, no matter where you are on the path, it's been quite the ride. And like Sam said, even if you don't watch the news, there is that pervasive sort of trauma that's really coming up. And we, as a species, as a collective, and as individuals, we all have very deep wounding from, I mean, I don't have to tell anyone how difficult it is to live in this realm, and how much trauma there is for all.
Yeah, exactly. You've cut out a little bit there, Kirsten. So just touching on what you were saying about the amount of trauma that's available, that we're not even just available, that we're all experiencing. I wanted us to go and touch on what you were talking about, past life trauma, because a lot of the work that we're called here to do, especially if you're like a grid worker, an energy worker, any kind of, I'm going to say a light star seed, but that's probably not the right word to use. You're here on a mission, essentially. You're here, you're an ensouled spark of God, and you're coming online at the moment. And part of the mission that a lot of us are all here to do, you know, irrespective of what particular mission we've got, is to anchor that light in. And this isn't saying that we need to avoid the darkness. It's quite the opposite, actually, because the more light that you bring in, the bigger the shadow is cast. And that's what's happening at the moment collectively. You know, we're being hit with all this solar radiation, which is actually divine light coming through. We're all being activated. Our DNA is being activated. We're becoming more crystalline. And as we do that, and it's changing, we're having to release more and more. And what that can actually look like, especially if you've done any kind of deep healing, when you go into it, it's really important to have your eyes open, because normally you'll be prompted to do this anyway through a certain amount of changes or catalysts that will happen within your external reality, because obviously, as within, so without. The things that we're putting into our awareness and our sphere are all aligned with what's internally going on at that time. So we can magnetize certain situations that allow us to go through the process of healing, recognizing, releasing all of this stuff that's kind of been sat within us. So I'll talk about my particular thing that I've been doing, a lot of shamanic healing. I do a lot of journeying, sound therapy, and we've had a lot of initiations this week as well, energetically, which we'll talk about as we go on. But what that's essentially done is it gives you a huge big jolt of energy. You restructure your inner systems, being that physical, because that follows from the energetics, and your energetic bodies. And what you're essentially doing is you're rearranging the architecture of your inner being. And obviously, because we're then projecting outwards, what that will then do is pull in this, not always, I will put a disclaimer out there, but generally what you will see is that you will pull things into your awareness. So things might break, you might have electrical issues. If you're running a lot of energy, you can definitely have electrical issues, as I know, and Kirsten knows as well, don't you? We can have altercations with family members. Things can come up, basically, that need to be addressed. We can get signs from our guides and inspirers, and they can be in lots of different forms. So they could be like the numbers or anything that you're aware of, synchronicities, and also animals, especially if you're on that kind of that shamanic path and you're becoming deepened into, the spirit of Mother Nature and how she communicates, which is obviously through our animal friends. And sometimes what animals can do is they can actually sacrifice themselves in certain ways to bring you a message. So I had an issue, I spoke about it in one of the podcasts a couple of weeks ago, where a squirrel ran out in the road, and unfortunately I couldn't swerve, and I killed the squirrel. But that was actually bringing me a message, and it's saying, hey, look at me. And when you start to see these things, they will unfold. So this is kind of what Kirsten means by sometimes we can have these really harrowing experiences. And sometimes, the purpose of that is to give us a shock and to bring forward certain feelings and emotions that resonate with locked-in trauma. And this can be very painful and very kind of jarring, for the system. And what we have to do is really cultivate this safe space to kind of, unpack and process and hold these emotions and these feelings and these things that come up. And as Kirsten's saying, we've all been dealing with past life stuff. This is something that's coming up for a lot of people now, because we're not here just to clear, the trauma of this lifetime. And I'm sure a lot of us have come in and had these really kind of horrific experiences, that have shaped our lives, but also give us that fertile breeding ground for us to grow and expand and learn through experience and healing. But also what can kind of happen is, we can be bombarded a little bit. So we need to really get these tips and tools and practices in place to ground ourselves in. I had an issue when I was dealing with some stuff that had come up, and I'd run quite a lot of energy. And what had actually happened is I'd become quite ungrounded because of the sheer amount of energy that I was bringing in, which some of you will probably find if you have anything like a Kundalini experience or any kind of energetic shifts quite suddenly and you're not prepared for it. Or even if you are sometimes, because like I said, the energy can be so intense, it can begin to unground you. And what that essentially means is you're being moved out of the rigid structure of your body. And I was kind of told that part of the initiation that I was going through was restructuring my brain. So because we're giving all these higher information and it comes through as kind of abstract concepts, we have to make our minds, our consciousness, not just the brain, but, a conscious awareness, less fixed and more malleable, which means that it can become difficult to fix on the solid structure of reality that we're experiencing and the solid structure of the thoughts that come into our minds and the way that we process things. So what I was guided to do was to make an energetic container so I could still bring the energy and hold it nicely, but I was able to retain a sense of self, because sometimes that can happen as well and you really lose yourself in the process, and it can almost facilitate this kind of ego death, like a small one, depending on how much is going on and what the psychosis is like. But the psychosis is essentially that you're losing your grip on reality. So I've recognized the symptoms. It's really important to have these practices in place to bring you back into your body so you're not completely expanded out into the universe, basically, and not you've got a grasp of what's going on, because that's the thing. We have to have a foot in both worlds. Even if we're doing our mediumship, even if we're communicating with other aspects of ourselves, it's really important to also be able to function. And what can happen sometimes is when you expand out into this psychosis state, it can be then very, very difficult because you're not fully aware of your physicalness to bring yourself back. And this is when you can start to have some problems. So what I was guided to do is to lock in with Mother Earth, basically. And you do this at your feet. You don't even have to be outside. You just need your feet for that basic, and you can feel the resonance from the earth. And it will feel like a magnet when you connect into it. It's almost like a pull from the bottom of your feet, and that's when you know you're kind of in. I know, Kirsten, you do yoga, don't you? You're the same sort of practice, don't you? When you're doing
Yes.
some of the positions. So yeah, and that
Yes.
creates that energetic exchange. So you're also being pulled down. So it's almost like your consciousness and your spirit is being then recondensed in your body, because you've got a focal point as well, which is the bottom of it, which is the feet. And then from that, I was guided to make a container, and then I could properly process what was going on, essentially. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. But then obviously once all this kind of energetic shifts have happened, because you've then reconfigured all your architecture, that's when you need to be grounded, because things are going to unravel sometimes around you. You know, these big shocks and things come then because we're pulling them into our awareness. Because what the divine is essentially wanting us to do, and what our own soul is wanting us to do, is shift into the alignment that we've created. And oftentimes we're not in an environment that reflects the internal state that we've cultivated then. So it has to kind of catch up, and that's why we have these tower moments.
You're absolutely right, and thank you for pointing that out. And when we talk about tower moments, all of that was beautifully said, Sam, by the way. And yeah, but when we talk about these tower moments, a lot of times we see things in terms of positive and negative. Of course we do, because we're living in a dualistic world, and that's how things operate in this world. However, if you take a little higher view and you recognize that spirit doesn't necessarily see things in that way. And so if you, say, have a dead animal presented to you or something like that, it's good to recognize, however your life crumbles, whatever is dying and falling away in your life, it's good to recognize that, well, your small ego self may see that as a tragedy, that that spirit doesn't necessarily see death as a tragedy. Spirit just sees it as a transition. And that's not to say it's not going to be difficult, because that's part of it too. The grief is part of leveling up, because you have to let go of everything that is connected to that experience or that situation. And the way that you let that go is to grieve it, to allow it to go, accept that it's going, and feel the feelings that makes you feel. And a lot of times it's not going to be comfortable or pretty or happy, but it is going to be cathartic. And on the other side of it, then that's when you start to, again, find those emotions that are more pleasurable in our experience, such as joy and gratitude.
I mean, that's a really good thing, gratitude. And I just want to touch on that, actually, because I always come back to that. No matter what happens, I sometimes lose my practice and I forget. But if I'm feeling really stuck, so I had an issue where I've had a lot of issues in my electrics, which is an external manifestation of what's going on inside, which is that I'm energetically and nervous, in my nervous system as well, especially, and being reconfigured to handle larger and larger amounts of energy. And there was a bit of an issue with water, which, again, as a sign, you will see that as a reflection of like your inner emotional state. It can have lots of different meanings depending on what you're working with and what you're aware of. But generally, I take that as a sign of an emotional change or something that I need to look at inside of me or maybe release, depending on the situation, because obviously everything's got nuance as well. And I was really having this issue, and I was actually I was losing it a little bit, which is really unlike me. But because, again, we've been primed, the nervous system is stimulated, we're put in this really intense position. I was totally overwhelmed, and it happens to the best of us. And I had to just catch myself, because that's the thing, that's when you go unconscious and you start to spiral. And we talk about presence. which is just the ultimate, panacea to everything, in my opinion. The more present you are, the more control you've got over your reality, what you're experiencing, how to bring in those bliss states, etc. It's the healing modality of creating the super present container. I can't wax lyrical enough about being present and being in this now moment. But what you essentially can do is, when you start to have this trauma that comes up, it will take you out of the now moment. And it's like you're switching into these unconscious states. But the more you do things like meditation, like yoga, things that get you in that now moment, you tend to pull yourself back quicker. So I found myself spiraling, and I became kind of the observer, and I was able to pull myself back into control. I was still experiencing what was going on, but it's kind of like you're able to put a buffer between you and the situation and the emotional charge. And what I actually did then to bring me back into the full presence was gratitude. And I was like, right, what do I need to focus on? What is this teaching me right now? What is this situation bringing to me? Even as horrible as it was mopping all this like horrible stinky water because my washing machine was buggered. And I was like, I'm so grateful, that it's bringing this into my awareness, and I know I'm going through a transformation. And that's just how you start. And what that will do is then it aligns your body and your being with that gratitude, and it's a higher resonance essentially, so it helps bring you back not only to the present moment, but it elevates your consciousness a bit as well and your overall frequency. So it's a bit of a medicine bomb, really.
Yes, and I agree with you so completely. Presence is really, if you can do anything, become present. That's all you have to do. And that's one of the reasons why meditation is so helpful, because it can teach you to take that step back. Because, and I'm not saying meditation is the only way you can do this, it's just a very easy and simple tool that you can use. But being able to recognize that you are not your thoughts, you're not your situation, you're not your emotions. And just step back and say, okay, what is this telling me? What is this experience right now? And that's not to say that you're not going to feel the grief, because that's precisely how to feel the grief. But or the or the complete frustration of having your washing machine break and there's water everywhere. You have to walk through that. You have to feel it. You have to be aware of it. And once you feel it, and once you become fully aware of it, it loses its charge. It loses its ability to shake you. And so it's finding the place where you can find that steadiness, even when everything is falling apart around you. And I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do, but it is quite doable. And the more you do it, the more you steer yourself into doing it, the more you will find that it's easier to navigate, because you have the practice to navigate it. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but that does make it a lot less difficult, because we all have our moments. This is just part and parcel of being here, is having these moments, and especially when the light gets brighter and brighter, because it's exposing all of those things that maybe we didn't see before because they were underneath something. But we also have to be ready to see them. And that's going on another tangent, is most of this stuff will not come up until you're ready for it. So they save the best to last, or the worst to last, depending on how you look at it.
Definitely. I mean, that's the thing as well. You've got to get your own kind of tools and tricks and tips to navigate. I mean, that's the thing. The longer you do it, the more you build up this kind of toolbox, don't you? That's the thing. And it isn't that it ever gets any easier, because we all have shocks. It doesn't matter how far you are on the path. I had a bit when I had my Kundalini awakening and whatever, and then like, oh, that's the great. I'm in the bliss state. I've done all my healing. Nah, absolute bollocks. What? Yeah, what a shock that was when I came and had my bum planted firmly on the ground. Basically had my ass handed to me.
Yeah,
Which we all do. But the point is, we have these ups and downs, and it doesn't matter how many times you've been through them. There will always be things that come up that pushes and challenges, because that's the nature of the experience. But what actually changes is your ability to ride the waves, and part of that is having a really good toolbox. And like Kirsten was saying, meditation, you don't have to sit there and go on. You don't have to sit there and have a completely empty mind. There's lots of different ways to meditate. It's just doing something that's bringing you in the now, or that's getting you in that it's like a theta state, isn't it, where your mind's empty and clear, basically, and you can calm the mind chatter, and that's how you essentially become a president. But what I did want to say was a really good tool is humour, because if you can see the hilarity in the situation, it just completely uses it to control of you, basically. And there's a lot of people that talk about these higher ascended masters that come in and they just laugh because they just see, the hilarity of it. And the more enlightened a being is, because I think further on the path of enlightening, maybe, they become less serious. And you'd think, there's all these really serious beings, and they're the ones that are really going to be, really super enlightened. And it isn't necessarily the case. Some of the most intelligent and enlightened beings that I've heard about, or even had the experience of encountering, have been incredibly joyful and giggly. And Kirsten and I have a similarity that our guides, they don't really scold us unless they've absolutely got to, but they love to poke a bit of fun at us, don't they? Especially when we're in the midst of our humans.
They do. They love to poke fun at us, and which reminds me of the clouds earlier. Yeah, the poke and everything. But they do, and they mock us. They mock us mercilessly sometimes, and that's the way to deal with Sam. Yeah, because if they scolded us, we'd just be like, ha! I'm going to do it more.
I'm going to cut my nose off the back of face. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you like that? So yes, mockery.
Yeah.
But that's and I think that's a really good thing to highlight, because it doesn't have to be serious. And a lot of times, you also made me think, Sam, about I worked as a social worker in child welfare many years ago, and it was a horrific situation. I didn't know what I was stepping into at the time, and I stepped out of it as quickly as I could. But one thing you'll know about people who work in jobs like that, people who work, and I've known people who worked as EMTs, and people who worked as nurses, and anyone who has a job where they have to confront really tragic, horrific things will generally have a really dark sense of humor.
It's true.
Again, it's a huge mechanism. But it's one, because laughter is actually a release. So just as you release a lot of stuff when you cry, you also release a lot of stuff when you laugh. And you might even say, either way, you're still releasing that energy of that emotion, rather than carrying it with you and letting it make you sick.
Yeah, it's just different ways to recognise it, isn't it? That's really important. And it's the physical act of laughing as well. Not only is it really joyful and brilliant, and it infuses your entire system. So what I do is, when I'm having a really good giggle, I feel the frequency of the giggle. And as you're laughing and you're moving your body, because obviously anything that moves your body is moving energy through it. You can feel into it, and pulsate it throughout your field, and it will just clean your field for you because it's that really high vibe energy.
That's a really good. That's a good tool, Sam. I like that. That's excellent
Yeah.
advice.
You know, and if you're not feeling so good, so there's another thing. I got a tip from the one of the shamanic practitioners that first started to kind of wake me up. I found her when I was good back in 2018, 19. She's called Sweet Soul, and she talks about things like entity attachments and stuff like that, and these negative thought loops you can get. And the good way to break them is to do a practice where you move out of the non-linear mind, essentially. Because then it can't anticipate what you're doing and you're moving into brand new creation because it's not like from a thought process, and you make funny movements, make funny noises, like, you know, move your head. The stranger the better, the more unplanned the better, and it kind of like breaks the spell almost. But what it does is as well, it'll move you out of that thought pattern. It's repatterning you, but it's also incredibly funny because you're just going, "Oh, whatever." You need to do it for a couple of minutes, and yeah, whatever's going on. It's pretty funny, and you just end up laughing at yourself. And then instantly, that situation where you were completely in the midst of, you know, completely losing it almost, because I've been like that before. I've done that, and it's completely brought me back round.
Yeah, it will. Anything you can do to just break whatever is happening and let that let go of it, push it through.
We've lost you, Kirsten. It's having a thunderstorm. I love a thunderstorm. It always clears the air, doesn't it? It makes it all nice and fresh. Oh, these negative ions.
Have to remember.
You're cutting out, my love. We're losing you. Yeah, you cut out.
Yeah. So any kind of release. I mean, even if you just want to move yourself around, that helps as well. And then you can laugh at yourself from, like Sam was saying. So is really helpful.
Oh, we've lost you again.
So through are basically the two things that you want to do.
I mean, we didn't aim up to that, Kirsten, but I think this is probably a good time to call it because I think your internet's deciding to leave us.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah. Oh, she's gone again, bless her. Yeah, we like lightning, but just not when we're doing podcasts. Thank you for being with us today. Kirsten? Oh, she's absolutely gone. She's completely frozen. Like a bird's eye fish finger. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. I wonder where I'm hoping she's going to come back. She needs to say goodbye. Yeah, just touching on the healing just before we do go. The big thing is not to feel like you're on your own as well. Like, it's always very difficult, isn't it? I think when we're going through these awakening processes, and a lot of our family and our friends don't necessarily understand what's going on, and we can really struggle to have people that relate to us and understand the depth and the emotions that are coming up, essentially. So, yeah. Oh, you're back.
I'm back.
Yeah, you're back. I was
Probably
just saying, Kirsten, before we left. No, we were just saying it's important to reach out to people and not feel like they're struggling on their own. But I think that's a really good place to kind of tie it up. So I'm going to say thank you, everybody, for joining us this week for another episode of the Metaphysical Fat and coming to chew it with us. So, Kirsten, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's perfect. I'm very grateful for all of you joining us today. And if you need help, like Sam said, do reach out and reach out to your friends if you know they're going through stuff. We love you all.
We love
Sam,
you.
you say.
That's, that's, catch you on the flip side.